Hello and welcome to Addicted to Lacrosse. This is season 5, episode 16. Today is Sunday, April the 1st, 2018. My name is Graham Perro. With me today is Melissa Daphne. Tyler is not available tonight. I guess we're hoping that he will be able to join us later, but it didn't sound like that was possible. Sorry for missing the show again last week. We've had a lot more scheduling issues this season than we had in previous years, but we just weren't able to get anything together last week. And obviously, only two of us are able to get together this week, and this is the only night that we're all available anyway. So this is as good as it gets, I'm afraid. And also, I have a cold, so hopefully I can make it through without too many coughing breaks or things like that. So I apologize in advance if something like that comes up. Start off. Let's go over a comment that was left on our YouTube video for the last episode 2 weeks ago. We talked about the potential new NLL team called the Halifax Privateers, and we wondered what a privateer was, and nobody knew. So one of our listeners, Anthony Garcia, left a comment, and he said that a privateer is a private person or ship engaged in maritime warfare. So I looked it up in various online dictionaries, and Anthony correct. Merriam-Webster says a privateer is an armed private ship licensed to attack enemy shipping, also a sailor on such a ship. Armed ship owned and crewed by private individuals holding a government commission and authorized for use in war, especially in the capture of merchant shipping. So there you go. Now we know what a privateer is. Thank you. A couple of pieces of news before we get to a couple of weeks worth of games. Hit the trade deadline, and there was pretty much nothing done. There was the only trade that happened was that the Rush sent lefty forward and Taylor to Toronto for a conditional third-round pick in 2020, and I think I read somewhere that the condition is if Taylor is protected by the Rock in the upcoming expansion draft, then that third-round pick becomes a second-round pick or something along those lines anyway. So it depends on whether Taylor is protected in the expansion draft. On a related note, to the Toronto Rock, that is, Tom Schreiber will return to the Rock lineup next weekend. I just read an article in U.S. Lacrosse or something saying that Schreiber will return next weekend in Georgia. So hopefully, speaking as a Rock fan, hopefully that gives the Rock a bit of a spark. They've been kind of hit or miss the last couple of weeks, and we'll get to that in a little bit when we talk about the games from last week. Roughnecks have clinched a playoff spot in the West with the win over Vancouver, so the West is now almost set. We have the Rush in first, the Mammoth in second. That can still change. The Roughnecks are in third. I don't think they can catch second, and the Stealth are in fourth. The East, meanwhile, is a total crapshoot, and it's possible that nothing will be figured out there until the last week of the season. So that's going to be pretty exciting. And the other piece of news is that Bleacher Report and the NLL have announced a contract for streaming games starting next season, something called BR Live or Bleacher Report Live. The NLL tweeted, BR Live tweeted, BR Live will be the exclusive destination for NLL beginning with the 2019 season. So it sounds like it's going to be replacing NLL TV, though in an interview with Teddy Jenner, Commissioner Nick Sikevich said that, or implied that NLL TV would kind of redirect you off to BR Live. So it basically sounds like they're replacing the existing NLL TV provider with this BR Live, and you'll need to sign up with Bleacher Report to watch games. But there's been no mention of whether it's going to be free or not, or how much it's going to cost, or if there's going to be different packages or anything like that. Pretty early days, I guess. They haven't figured all of that stuff out. They did say that one of their prime goals with this is better quality of streaming and of production. So we can look forward to that. I guess we can only hope. Yeah, we'll report on that once we see it, but we can remain hopeful. Let's just say there. Okay, so that's pretty much all we know about that. Hasn't been much released in the way of details, just that we're getting a new provider next year. So we'll see what happens. Okay, a couple of weeks worth of games that we can talk about. I'll go over quickly what happened in those games. We have Buffalo wiping the floor with New England, 20-7. Georgia beat New England. Toronto beat Calgary. Rochester over Saskatchewan. That was a bit of a surprise. And Vancouver over Colorado, which also was a bit of a surprise. So that was last week. And this week just passed. We had Colorado over Toronto. Then they lost to Rochester the next night. Buffalo and New England met again. This time it was a little closer, but Buffalo won. And Calgary beat Vancouver to take that last playoff spot in the West, as I mentioned before. So we will get, we'll get to the awesome and not awesome section of the show. Tyler was not able to join us tonight, as I said, but he was also not able to fill in any information on the show notes. So we don't have anything from Tyler to read. So I guess I will start off with a really quick one. Just this is in the Bandits New England game from 2 weeks ago when the Bandits won 20-7. I think we were just talking.
Yeah, I think it was 20-7, something totally crazy. Yeah, 20-7.
20-7. Yes, that was a fairly even game for a little while, and then Buffalo scored 5 straight, and then New England started to come back early in the third quarter, and then Buffalo scored 12 goals in about 15 minutes, and that was pretty much it. It went from 7-4 early in the third quarter to 19-4 early in the fourth quarter. So that was pretty much it. So my awesome there was not only just the Buffalo offense in general, but specifically Von Harris. And he played, I think, 2 games with the Calgary Roughnecks last year. But because I'm not sure what the threshold is, he's still considered a rookie this year. And he had 8 points, so 4 goals, 4 assists. He also won 69% of his faceoffs, and he was facing off against Jay Thornbert, so not a bad night for Von Harris. So that's my awesome for that game. Melissa, you can start us off by giving us the next one.
All right. So my awesome, it definitely pertains to last week, and since it has been a week, I'll admit memories are a little fuzzy. But it was just a weekend of exciting games, including some upsets. So that's definitely not what we expected. I know my picks, which we'll get to, I went 0-5. So I certainly did not expect those results. But overall, it was just an exciting weekend of games. So it looks like this weekend was more of that. So what about you, Graham?
Agreed. The Creams from 2 weeks ago were great. And this past weekend's games were pretty close as well, and some fun ones, and some not so fun ones, which I guess we'll get to in a minute. My next awesome, I guess probably everybody knows about because it's kind of a semi-viral thing, and that is Todd LaBranche's call in the Vancouver, Colorado game. He was giving out coincidental minors. I can't remember if it was for roughing or off-ball foul or something along those lines.
It was roughing.
Was it roughing? And I'm sure if you're a fan of lacrosse enough that you're watching this show, you've probably seen it. But instead of just coming on, turning on his mic and saying, 2 penalties, roughing, 2 minutes, and that's it, which is what he normally do, he says, these two were clearly having issues with each other, could not restrain themselves, so we're going to give them 2 minutes to think about what they've done. And that was pretty awesome. Just off the cuff, I guess he just decided, it's a little fun, and the commissioner's here, and the commissioner's brought a bunch of investors to check out the game and that kind of thing, and so let's kind of spice things up. And so that was kind of fun. Teddy Jenner talked about it on his show a few days ago, and I agree with him. If all the refs decide to start doing this all the time, that'll get old real fast. But if LaBranche starts doing this once a month or a couple of times a season kind of thing, yeah, that could be kind of fun. I wouldn't have a problem with that. If it gets out of hand, then it's just silly. But every now and again, it was kind of fun. And I thought that was pretty awesome. Melissa.
Yeah, that was quite did that really just happen? Because it was so abnormal. And he I don't think he had a Twitter account before the incident started going viral. Now has a Twitter account, so it might be interesting to see some insight from one of the refs. It was. I have to kind of suck at that, Awesome, because that's just not something you typically see. But we'll go ahead and expand on those two. Talking about that game, Cupido's interception late in the fourth quarter was just beautiful. Colorado wasn't able to pull it out, but at that point, it was crucial, and that interception made a difference in them potentially being able to score again. It just didn't come out that way. But it was, it was one of those crucial plays that you need right then, and it was beautiful. So we'll go with Cupido. What about you, Graham?
All right, my next one is the Vancouver Stealth, believe it or not. This was, I added this to the show notes last week, so they may not be feeling all that awesome this week, but at the time they were 2-11 or 1-11, I guess. And they were going in to face the Mammoth in Colorado. And so, I mean, we all know it's technically possible that they could still make the playoffs if they run the table and Calgary loses everything from then on. It was possible, but really unlikely. But at the same time, the Stealth went down fighting, and they didn't have Logan Schuss in their game against the Mammoth last weekend, or 2 weekends ago, and they played really well. Obviously, they won that game, and Calgary lost, so their playoff hopes stayed alive for another week. They died this past weekend when they lost to Calgary, but I don't have the details for that game on my computer, so I'll have to find that. But in any case, they played really well in both of those games. Could have won either one. Did win one of them. So just the fact that they're going down fighting, even without Logan Schuss in that game, I thought they played really well. And it's been said before, but they might be one of the better teams with a 2-12 record, because there haven't been a lot of games that they've really been just completely outplayed. And I mean, obviously the one game against the Rock early on when they lost 24-7, they were pretty much late in that one. But in a lot of these games, they were in it till close to the end. Maybe they ran out of gas near the end of the game, or they were just, playing a better team, but they were in them for the most part. So it's really unfortunate when you see a team that's in the game for that length of time, in that many games, and still just can't pull off the win. So it's kind of unfortunate. But the fact that they played well is my third awesome. Melissa, what's next?
Yeah, I know I bring it up a lot. It always makes me think of the Attack when they went 0-12. And it was like, you're like, oh, they must have been a horrible team. No, they lost every single one of those games by 1 or 2 goals. And so it's kind of that same thing. They were just in it. They just couldn't seem to pull it out. My next awesome, I thought the Toronto-Calgary game feed from last week was just absolutely gorgeous. I don't know if some cameras got changed. I know it was the Twitter game of the week, and we had talked last time we recorded that apparently my host feeds weren't the same because Graham had gotten my hopes up talking about how beautiful the game looked, and then I watched and went, oh my god, what is this pixelated crap? That wasn't the case with this one. It was just beautiful. I can imagine if you had a 4K TV that it really would have looked good. I just have a high def one, but it's just beautiful. And so hopefully that maybe is a sign for what we'll be getting with our new network. Fingers crossed. What about you, Graham?
Actually, the last couple of games I've seen from Rochester have been really good. Not only has the feed itself been stable in that it didn't drop, it didn't get all choppy, but we've got high def video now from Rochester, and they were certainly the last arena to get that, and we've seen some pretty lousy feeds out of Rochester over the years, but the last couple have been really good. So we can hope that going forward, Rochester will be just one of those places where we get a decent feed from. So that'll be good.
That is good. I know I've avoided some of the games for that exact reason. Watching them.
Yeah, sometimes they got really hard to watch. All right, I'm all out of awesomes, actually. I did watch a couple of the games this past weekend. but I wasn't really taking notes, and so there were probably a few awesome things that happened this past weekend, but I didn't make note of them, and they're not coming to my mind right now. So if you have any more awesomes, Melissa, you can go ahead. Otherwise, we'll move on.
I don't. Unfortunately, I don't have anything for this week's games.
All right, I guess we will start with the not awesomes, and this one may be behind the times. No, I guess it's still there. This is from last week. It was going to be on last week's show. New England started last weekend in first place by themselves and ended the weekend in last place by themselves. And it was possible that this past weekend, if they had won and Toronto and Rochester had both lost, then the Black Wolves would have been back in first again. So first to last to first in 2 weeks. That didn't happen. The Black Wolves lost a couple games. Rochester won, Toronto lost. And so now Rochester's in first. Buffalo's tied with them. Toronto and Georgia are tied for third at 7-7, and New England is still in last. So first to last place in 1 week is pretty wild. And now they're as close to cemented in last place, but they're still only a game back of first. Or sorry, game and a half back of first. So like I said before, we may not know what's happening in the East until the very last week of the season. So that's kind of exciting. But falling from first to last in a single week is certainly not awesome, and I'm sure the Black Wolves aren't happy about it. Melissa, what do you have?
Yeah, that's definitely one of those awesome, not awesome things because, I know how it's been sometimes in the West when you're on the edge of your seat every week going, oh my God, are we going to stay in? Are we going to make the playoffs? No. And there was definitely one game it came down to with the Mammoth where they had to win, and it was like overtime, and they lost, and season's over, and it's that. So it's definitely an awesome, not awesome, because it's so stressful as a fan, but it's also awesome. So my not awesome, I suspect it was a little bit of the same this week as well, but it was very frustrating for me watching my Mammoth. They may have eked out the win, but they just looked really sloppy doing it. And even Teddy Jenner commented at least 4 or 5 times on the sloppy play. And that's not something he does too often. So it was one of those, I think they just went into the game thinking they were just going to take it easily. And Vancouver showed them that they weren't. And Vancouver definitely put up a fight. So that would be my not awesome. The Mammoth they didn't go in playing like they were going to, they went in to win it. They played like, yeah, we got this. So that's
never a good idea in this league.
Yeah. Like you said, Vancouver has a bad record. That doesn't mean that they've been playing poorly. They started off poorly, but they haven't been doing so lately. So, right, what about you?
All right, my next one is the Toronto offense in the game against Colorado. And not awesome is a bit of an understatement for this. It was just terrible. Props to the Colorado defense and Dylan Ward, who were excellent. The defense were just limiting shots all the time. Most of the shots that made it through the defense just hit Dylan Ward straight in the chest. They seemed to be shooting 5-hole on him a lot, and he was just able to stop almost all of them. But in terms of the actual offensive players on the Rock, Kieran McArdle had an assist. Reed Reinhold had an assist. Both of those were on the same goal. Jones, Hellier, Hickey, Taylor, and Caputo combined for 0 points. And I'm not sure that has ever happened in an NLL game, that not a single offensive player scored a goal at all. I don't have the detailed stats enough to go through and find any game like that, but I'd be surprised if that has ever happened. So they got, I think, 5 transition goals and 2 goals from people who are usually considered pure defenders in Brad Cree and Billy Hostrauser. So the defense was doing their job. Actually, the Toronto defense in general did really well. Nick Rose had a pretty decent game. Wasn't outstanding, but didn't need to be. He only allowed 10 goals. And like I said, the defense was good. The transition played really well. And when your transition scores 5 goals and your defense scores a couple, you should be in a pretty good position to win. but the offense just couldn't get anything going at all. So I'm hoping that Tom Schreiber returning next week gives them the lift that they need to get back into things. I'm hopeful that will happen quickly. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. But anyway, the Toronto offense in that game was certainly what you'd call not awesome. Melissa, do you have another one?
All right, so I know that you have it as you're not awesome, but I'm going to kind of steal it a little bit. We definitely had at least a couple of fans that made the rounds on Twitter because of their vehement tweets towards the goalies who weren't necessarily at fault. So yeah, I would say that's kind of not awesome in the best, most polite way. It definitely showed some ignorance, and I'm not going to say I know this game in and out, but it was definitely it was like a drunk text. It was just so, wow, okay, yeah. So I'm going to say that's mine not awesome, and I'm not going to fully go on it because I'm sure you have a few comments to add.
Sure. Yeah, that's like you said, that was my next one. So I didn't write down the whole text of the tweet, but this was a Colorado fan, and I have fan in quotes, who tweeted that Dylan Ward should be released or he should retire because of his performance against Vancouver, which he called a damn disgrace. And did Dylan Ward have an outstanding game against Vancouver? Well, no. He had a 70.5% save percentage, allowed 13 goals to a 1-11 team. So yeah, he had a bad game, but everybody has a bad game. To blame that loss entirely on Dylan Ward just is ignorant, as you said. That's probably the best way to say it. And like you said, we're not experts. I've been accused of carrying myself as if I am an expert, and if that's the case, I certainly apologize because I don't consider myself one in any way, shape, or form. But to simply blame the goalie for allowing 13 goals in a lacrosse game is ridiculous, because I mean 13 goals in a lacrosse game is not terrible. And as we've said, Vancouver, sure, they have a lousy record, but they have strong players, and every player has a bad game now and again, and that was Dylan Ward's. And it wasn't even bad enough that they pulled him to put in the backup goalie. So it's hard to say that it was Dylan Ward's fault. And the thought of releasing him or asking him to retire is utterly ridiculous, because that's one bad game. And other than that, he's one of the goalie of the year candidates. There was another fan who said on the Rocks Facebook page that the loss to Colorado this past weekend was Nick Rose's fault. He allowed 10 goals on 50 shots, and the offense scored 0 goals. How on earth is that the goalie's fault? That just makes no sense at all. So yeah, so these kind of comments are kind of funny, and the fact that you said it sounded like a drunk tweet or a drunk text is probably accurate. It's the kind of thing you come home and go, that guy sucks, he should be fired. And then you send it out, and maybe the next day you look at it and go, well, maybe that's a little unrealistic or whatever. But
especially
the Rock fan
when
actually
it
doubled
makes
down.
The rounds in the lacrosse community.
The Rock fan who posted that, I posted a follow-up saying the offense scored nothing and you think it was the goalie's fault? And he actually sort of doubled down on it and said, well, your goalie should be able to steal you a game here and there. And he didn't. Okay, sure, he didn't, but you don't get to decide which games he steals for you. And it has happened in the past that Roses had a great game and the offense didn't do well, but they won anyway. But when the offense does nothing and your goalie, like trying to, the entire Rock team scored 7 goals. Are you really saying that you're blaming Rose because he allowed more than 6? Like that's just unrealistic. So
yeah, I remember going through a few of those conversations. Awesome. Oh, I forget. I think it may have been when we first got Ward, when he was struggling a little bit. And it's like, It doesn't matter if your goalie only lets one goal in. If your offense can't score two, then you're going to lose. Like, it doesn't matter. Your offense has to pull their part. You have to have a team. Defense has to stop as much as they can. Goalie has to stop what they can. Offense has to score. You don't score more than the other team, it doesn't matter what your goalie did. So.
All right, so that's it for me in terms of not awesomes. Did you have any more?
My not awesome was going 0-5 last week. That really sucked. I haven't had 0-5 for at least a few seasons. So yeah, that was one of those. What happened this weekend? So at least I did better this week. So
yeah, you kind of redeemed yourself. So we'll get to that now. We have a couple of weeks to look at. Week before last, I went 2-3. Tyler went 2-3, and Melissa was 0-5. Last week was a little better for some of us. I broke even at 2-2. You went 3-1. Nice job. And Tyler went 0-4. So we have a couple of offers in a couple of weeks. So the standings remain the same as before. Melissa is in the lead at 39-26. I'm right behind at 37-28, and Tyler he had just hit the 500 mark, and then the 0-4 week didn't help, so he's now at 30-35. So we don't have predictions for Tyler for next week. He usually tweets them near the end of the week if he can't get them onto the show. So look for that. But in the meantime, Melissa, you can give us your thoughts on next week's games. There's only 3.
all right, so I'm going to go with the Rush. There's part of me that's wondering if the Rush is going to put their all in because they've secured a playoff spot. There's not much going, but I think there's enough rivalry between these two. Not to mention with the Rush losing.
There's also the possibility that Colorado could catch the Rush and take over the number 1 spot, and I doubt the Rush want that to happen.
Yeah, so I think Rush are the safe bet there. Colorado, like I said, they've just had a little bit too much sloppy play. With Calgary and New England, I'm going to go with Calgary. New England is certainly going to be putting up a fight, but especially it's kind of hard to pick New England. Or was it last weekend? Sorry. Whatever, 20-7. They're either going to come out really scrappy or they're still going to be licking their wounds. I don't know which team. So I'm going to go with the Roughnecks. Toronto and Georgia is a tough one. And Graham and I talked about this before the show because we're looking at it. It's like, oh, which of those two teams is going to show up? Because both of them have been so hit or miss lately. Georgia's looking better. Toronto's getting Schreiber. Oh, man, which one? Flip a coin. I'm going to go with the home team because sometimes that travel can make a difference. And Georgia's definitely had some shining spots lately. So we're going to go with Georgia. I will admit, I'm not as confident in my picks this week. So, what about you, Graham?
All right. Game 1, Colorado and Saskatchewan. I'm also going to go for the Rush. Yeah, like you said, they've locked up. Both of them have locked up playoff spots, but Colorado will be very hungry for that first place overall, and Saskatchewan has first placed overall, and I think they would be quite happy to keep that. So I think they'll be. It's kind of not. I don't know, but it. I don't know. It's. I had a thought and it went away, so now I've got nothing. But
we'll blame the cold.
Yeah, that's what it is. So I'm gonna go with the Rush on that one. All right, Calgary, New England, and I'm blanking again. My God, what's going on? I have to do some serious editing of this show. All right, Calgary, New England. I'm gonna go for Calgary. New England is on a 4-game losing streak. I'm sure they will get back into the swing of things. They're not that bad a team, but Calgary is. Well, I guess they've won. I don't know, 3 of their last 4 or 4 of their last 5 or something like that. They're on a bit of a streak, and they're looking really good. Christian Del Bianco looked really good again this past weekend. On his way to potential goalie of the year season, and I don't see that stopping anytime soon. So I'm going to go for Calgary there. Toronto, Georgia, like you said, this is a tough one. Toronto gets Schreiber back, and my concern there is they say, oh, good, Schreiber's back. We're off the hook now, and everything will be just back the way it was before. And it's just not going to be that easy, especially against the Swarm, and the Swarm are looking a little more like the Swarm from last year than they were like the Swarm from earlier this year. So I hate picking against the Rock, but I'm going to go for Georgia this week, and that should do it. All right. Anything else that you wanted to mention, Melissa?
I don't think so. It's hard to believe we're heading towards the end of the season. It's gonna go into crazy mode here. I can't wait to watch what happens with the East. So
Absolutely. So yeah, I guess that will do it for another episode of Addicted to Lacrosse. For Tyler and Melissa, or for the absent Tyler and Melissa, I'm Graham. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.